last session for the day, and it is it's the absolutely the right topic, to wrap up this wonderful day where we've heard from a lot of speakers, a lot of insights. To run the next panel, I'd like to invite Paul, and the topic really is the Great Reset, building the right team for data-driven enterprise. Paul, over to you.
Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Paul. I'm the editor of DSAI for CDOTrends. So I'm probably a little bit biased, but I think we have one of the most interesting panels here, right? But before I introduce my panelists, just a quick, round up about the topic. So we all know, right? The shift for digital first require reskilling for existing roles and creating new roles, right? We are hearing things like citizen data scientists. We are hearing things about, data governance officers. We're hearing about AI ethics officers, all new stuff, right? That, if you go back in time for 5 years, people wouldn't understand what you're talking about. So here we are. All right. I have with me on my panel 3 very established gentlemen who have lots of experience in this new data-centric world. I have John Lee. He's the Group Digital Chief Information Officer for Chubb. All right. Thank you for going ahead. We have Sourabh. He's the Regional VP of Asia IT Transformation and Strategy for Liberty Mutual Insurance. Hi, Sourabh. Nice to have you here.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me.
And we have Achim, Principal Analyst at Forrester. So, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So, I guess, the pandemic is a word that has been on our lips for far too long now. But yet there's no denying that the impact it has on our organizations. So I'd like to hear from any of you. How has the pandemic accelerated digital transformation in your organization, and how are you using data differently today? Maybe Sourabh, want to go first?
Maybe I could start with this as Achim Granzen, because I may be able to bring in a slightly different perspective, because I wouldn't want to talk about my organization, Forrester Research, but on what we are seeing in the region, and that's the work that we do with clients across the region. And we see that there's, I think, 3 points I would like to make around digital transformation in the Asia Pacific region. The first one is that COVID has definitely accelerated the digital transformation. Organizations really across the region say that, yes, they have invested more, or they have accelerated their effort in digital transformation over the last 12 to 18 months. So that's definitely there, and that's not surprising. I think that's what we all see. Obviously, a lot of that has focused on mobility, enabling remote work, or essentially enabling working from anywhere. So that's one piece of good news. One piece of not so good news is what we're also finding is that actually Asia Pacific as a region falls behind the global average when we look at organizations that are currently engaged in digital transformation. So we have across the region just under 50% of firms that are saying they are engaged in DT, which is lower than the global average. That's one thing that we need to keep in mind. But especially if you look at the growth markets, say Indonesia and Malaysia, there's a lot of dynamic there. So these markets will definitely be catching up with the global average again, say by end of 2020. So that's maybe in a nutshell where we see the state of the digital transformation in the region.
Well, it's good to hear that APAC is catching up. Thank you.
Yes, it has. We have to close the gap. I mean, that's what most countries are on track to do that.
I'm just curious, but what do you see as the main reason that that we are playing catch up? I mean, could it be a cultural mindset? Could it be the lack of the talented professionals in this area?
Well, there's a few things on that. I think it's not necessarily a cultural thing, but when we ask what are the challenges, then the number one challenge is lack of technology skills and knowledge. So the skills issue is really important here. The second one that usually comes up, we don't actually have the people, or people don't have the time to focus on, say, digital transformation initiatives, which means there's a strategic misalignment in a way, which is probably normal in fast-growing markets. So that's I think something to be expected. But the skills comes up probably as the number one challenge, and a strategic alignment is not fully in place yet. But I'm generalizing a bit here with the second one.
Right. Pardon me, I mean, if I just ask a little bit more about this, but I mean, you mentioned that skills are not in place yet. So, I mean, is there any, because one of the earlier round tables that we have, I mean, we're talking about the shortage of skill sets and how everyone is trying to hire the same data scientists or data analytics people, right? Do you think the cloud can help facilitate or bridge this gap in the skills?
Well, yes and no, but I think the problem lies in something that you said, Paul. Everybody tries to hire the same data scientist, and that, in my perspective, is the wrong approach. You have to build the skills yourselves. You have to build the skills. You have to invest in building these skills. You can call that citizen data scientist, but I would call that simply as making an investment in training people with the skills that you need. Hire new people, put them on a training program for 6 months, 8 months, 12 months. If you look back 22 years when I started, Y2K was a big thing. Tech companies couldn't get enough of engineers. So what did they do? They paid people to come on a training program. And I don't see much of that happening now with data science skills or data skills. I think that's something that organizations must look into. Build your own skill. Pay people 6 months, as an example, to actually pick up these skills, and then essentially offer them a contract. I say it worked 20 years ago. It worked, and I think that's something more organizations should actually look at.
Wow, hire or train, right? I mean, if there's time later, I want to revisit this topic. But in the meantime, any of you have any questions, feel free to send them in. Remember, there's still one more lucky draw coming up after our panel, right? So let me go back to the main question, which is, how has the pandemic accelerated the digital transformation in your organization, and how are you using data differently? So maybe you can hear from Sourabh or John.
Sure.
Sourabh,
sure, I'll go ahead. Sorry, John. So obviously, I mean, one of the things I'm working, so in Liberty Mutual, I take care of the regional strategy and transformation. So one of the things is, when you talk about strategy or transformation, it's always about, a lot of forward-looking vision, right? You talk about 3 years, 5 years sort of roadmaps, and you do a lot of PowerPoints, and you do a lot of, convincing the stakeholders. One of the things which I observed is obviously from the PowerPoint that has moved on to real execution. And what Achim just mentioned, the real execution is happening. We are seeing a lot of traction in terms of deployment of a lot of initiatives which were like in the planning phase. Now they have accelerated, and we are saying, hey, we need to build the digital front end. We need to look at the employee seamless experience, and we also need to look at the security aspects. I mean, because with more and more data coming in, obviously people are working from home, you're bringing your own devices. So there is a lot, your risk of exposure is pretty high as compared to what it was probably 18 months back. So from that perspective, acceleration has happened in a positive manner. A lot of execution is happening. The data is really playing a role because, when we look at future of work, for example, from an employee perspective, because in the new normal, when you talk about that, then we do a lot of surveys, a lot of data points which we collect. So HR is collecting, senior leadership is collecting, and we are kind of saying, hey, how do we want to change the workspace in general, right? From an employee experience perspective. So, and for that, you need a lot of data. You do a lot of surveys, you collect that data, and then you turn it into actionables. Similarly, from a customer experience point of view, that's an important element, and I'm sure John will relate to it coming also from an insurance point of view, right? So we talk, as insurance companies, we talk a lot about, customer experience, but we have very old or kind of traditional backend systems. So at front end, you're trying to modernize, but your backend is still kind of not up to the mark. And so what do? You basically try to convert your monolithic architecture to microservices-based, more modular architecture, and that is not overnight journey. That takes time. And in the same time, you have to kind of look at a customer experience angle. So this is one of the other areas where there is a lot of focus, focus on customer journeys, looking at the data coming from the customers, having more of an outside in view rather than an inside out view, that I'll develop a product and then, it will float through based on data research. It's more around, getting that outside in view, which is coming into picture. And that's where a lot of data gathering is happening, again, through surveys, again, through customer touch points from the web or digital interfaces. And the third angle, so employee, customer, and the third one is around basically the business itself, right? So business has to kind of progress. I mean, you can't bring the business to a standstill. So the good news is that, okay, yes, my top line might not be improving as much, but my bottom line, because my losses are low, no one is driving the car, no one is kind of, and the new models are evolving basically from a data point. So like peer-to-peer insurance, or probably look at telematics, pay as you use sort of models. So the business model itself is evolving. So those are the three angles which I would like to say from a transformation and data standpoint. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for giving a bird's eye view on the whole thing. We have some questions coming in, but we'll get to that shortly. So let us give John a chance to share about how is DX happening in his organization, and how are they using data differently.
Very good. Thanks,
John, over
Paul.
to you.
It's always good to follow other people who set the stage with sort of intelligent comments that I can build on. So thank you guys for going before me here. So I'll answer your question a couple ways. First, of course, maybe set my own stage here. I kind of think of the 21st century is defined as being about data and digital, as do we all. I think data is increasingly pervasive. All things, all the time, everywhere in real time, at some point will be known. It is the blessing of the 21st century in the age of digital. I think the second dimension of this is increasing what we do and how we do it daily. Our journeys are increasingly digital. And I think the pandemic's accelerated that. Call a taxi, digital. Order food, digital. An e-consult with a doctor, digital. Buy a cell phone, plan a trip. Increasingly, the number of things that I do, my day-to-day journeys, are increasingly digital. So the pervasiveness of data around us, all things, all the time, everywhere, and the increasing percentage of my time, my interactions with the world around me, digital. These are sort of the stages. So then, what does that mean for what we do in insurance? I'd say there's really three things. By the way, I think the pandemic's accelerated the latter of the two. I think the data story is what it is, but I think the greater percentage of that which we're doing digitally online has been accelerated. That doesn't change it for us in insurance. I think what it does, it creates a greater opportunity for innovation and to activate on that. So I'd say there's three things. Clearly, there's the products, what we sell. Insurance, if you think about it, managing risk is the heart and soul of that, is understanding the statistics of what's going wrong. So more data, more things. It's going to make our product smarter, sharper. There's more sources, more signals to act upon. And I think we'll be able to see a broad range of new innovations around the product, smarter products that are more and more tailored to situations and circumstances. And of course, when you start to factor in not just the rear view mirror look of 100 years of data and smarter questions to ask, but also the forward-looking view of predictive analytics and sensors and so forth, it's just going to get more and more exciting. And how do we harness those signals? So the product, for one. Two, is the way in which we distribute and deliver what we do. So we talk about, a taxi, one of my favorite examples. You're not going to buy insurance for a taxi ride, but at the same time, we can embed the coverage of insurance in that ride. You may, in Singapore, when you take the taxi, you tick that box, and for a few extra pennies, you've got personal accident cover for the duration of your ride. We've embedded insurance in that digital journey, somebody else's journey. When you pay a bill, we've embedded the bill protection so you don't get sticker shock when you're home overseas. When you're at the bank and you're doing insurance, how do we embed the purchase and consumption of risk in the digital journeys that we experience every day, where it's an afterthought? And I think that has certainly been accelerated, and certainly we're spending a lot more time to partner with people who provide goods and services as part of our daily lives and make us seamless. I think the third and final one is, like everybody else, the customer experience. The insurance customer experience is dreadful historically. But if I know all things all the time, everywhere, why do I, no more 21 dumb questions when I do a claim? My ability to say yes instantly. I mean, my favorite example is I'm at the airport, my flight's been delayed, I've got travel insurance. I know that. I don't need to make a customer go and fill in a form and do this. Why don't I just simply put the refund in your account right in there? I know who you are, where you are, what's happened. So I think the third is around the customer experience. In a world where all things are known all the time, everywhere in real time, why is our customer experience so dreadful? Why can't we tap some of these signals, tap some of this knowledge, and completely transform the experience? So in summary, the pervasiveness of data is a driver. The embeddedness of digital, and it's driving innovation across all three: what we sell, how we sell it, and then how we serve the customers. I apologize. I hope that wasn't too long-winded, but
no, that was great. I mean, it's great to hear how digital and data is completely transforming how the insurance industry is working. And clearly our conversation around getting the right skill sets has struck a few chords there. I mean, I have a few questions come in. Let me just take a look at one of them. So one question from the audience, right? He's saying, what would be a good mix of skill sets to make a good data team, right? So I know Achim talked about hiring the right people and then training them, but I think this participant's question really is, compared, you have data scientists on one hand, and then you have the business people who knows the in and out of the business. How do you bridge the gap between them? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, maybe if I'll start with that one. I think the question is absolutely valid, right? So how do we get out of this siloed view, or out of this view with blinders on? And we traditionally, I think, look at skills more like a checkbox and trying to drive down on an expertise, right? Which is probably not really what we need anymore. But we can't have essentially specialists in all styles, right? That we can't do that either. So how do we bring people in that have say in a specialization, say in technology, but an open enough vision to understand business? How do we bring those together with business people who obviously know their business processes, their goals and challenges, but are interested to finding new ways of solving them? So I think that's a team structure, that's a team approach. And there's multiple ways of I think doing that. It doesn't have to be an org structure, but it's more like a virtual team. Some people call it center of excellence, which is not a good name because it implies a permanent structure. But how you build these teams, how you build them, maybe you can do that in an agile way. So you have to bring the people together. You have to build teams and bring the skills mixed. Don't expect this to find in one person. But put a structure in place. You could call it as a platform virtually, where these people can come together. That requires leadership, so that is probably something that you should put in place. But then it's essentially more on getting the right people together to have the skills mix. That's how I think you can make this successful.
Thank you. So getting the right people together, having a structure, and of course leadership to make it happen. Awesome. John or Sourabh, what are your thoughts about building bridging the gap between business skills and data skills?
So from my point of view, right? So one of the things which we always have, which Achim kind of highlighted, is hiring people with the data science skills in the market, right? So the question is, do we really need the data scientists from the market? That is the basic question to answer, and there is a fight for talent. So if you have a fight for talent, do you really want to go that route? And because you might get people, like for example, in any domain, you would need to have that person having some sort of a domain knowledge, right? So if that domain, and that could be trained, right? So whether you're in an insurance industry or a bank, or so that also takes some time for a person to understand the domain, and that could be any ways of training. Yes, they might have the skills in SQL, algorithms, etc. But and that could be the good part. But still you have a learning curve, bringing in people from outside. One of the ways we have tried is basically looking at people within the business who have like good Excel skills. We have Excel, MI skills. We do a lot of reporting, right? I mean, it's not that there's no reporting which happens currently. I mean, every organization, we still do a lot of reporting. It's a question of, whether you're talking about megabytes of data or you're talking about zettabytes of data, right? So then I think the question is, if you have people who are analytical, whom you know within the organization, so and they have the domain knowledge, working in the business, being in the organization. So we have tried training some of those people with very sound analytical skills. And then that has kind of helped us bridge the gap to some extent. I'm not saying that it is a 100% foolproof method, but then that has also given us some sort of a leeway. And it also follows into the point of having citizen data scientists, right? So you basically, you have a lot of tools available in the, and you can leverage technology basically to do a lot of number crunching, a lot of data scientist work. I'm not undermining the skills of data scientists. I fully respect a lot of skills needed, but at the same time, when you are getting stuck in a war of talent and you still need to get to deliver, then what are some of the innovative ideas you can come up with? So business users, highly skilled in domain as well as in analytics, scale them up, send them on training programs to pick up some of these skills. Secondly, to look at the tools which are available, and can we leverage some of those tools and retrain or reskill some of our people who are within the organization. Yes, it might take time, but I mean, even hiring someone can take a long time, right? So you need to look at those things. So those are two of the things which we are doing, especially within our organization, to bridge that sort of a gap.
Thank you so much. So there's no running away from the need to do training. There's no running away from doing the need for do training, and of course, tools can help when it comes to that. Thank you, John. Over to you.
Sure. If you ask me the simple question about, train or hire, whatever I tell you is wrong, and I've been wrong every time I've been asked this question in my third-year IT career. So let me try and answer it differently. I'd offer this. First and foremost, you think about the teams you need organized around a business problem or a hypothesis or an opportunity. And within that, that's your sort of your North Star or your guiding light. You can't just go and hire a bunch of data analysts or a bunch of scientists and organize them around those technical competencies. So I think that I would throw that out first and say, look, make sure that what you're trying to solve for and the mix of skills in that are aligned around a real business problem. Unless you've got the luxury of just hire lots of data people and figure out what to do with them later, which a lot of companies don't. But then what I might do is I then might break it down one a little further and say, if I look at sort of the dichotomy or the mix of skills, I kind of think of three. I think you've got data nerds, no disrespect to them. They understand how to collect it, how to aggregate it, how to normalize it, how to cross-reference it, master it. And that's a skill and a discipline. There's critical thinking and mastery of tools that we need. And I would just buy that if I could. I'm wrong, but I would buy that, train those who you can. But that's a skill you need. The second part of it, the next value add, and not to diminish the first, is the insights, the AI, the analytics, this saying, how do I seek patterns in the data that I have? How do I find the value in what I've stitched together and gathered now that I can see? Those are definitely a different animal of skills. And there's a mix of, you need to have enough domain from your industry to be effective, but then you also don't typically have those skills in-house. So I might argue you're going to buy some, you're going to train some, but that middle tier of extracting value in data is powerful. And look, to be honest, I would say that the types of things we're trying to solve for are largely statistical. We talk a good game about AI and ML, but the truth is some of the stuff that we're seeking answers to is a little more basic and crude. So I wouldn't necessarily post jobs that say I need AI and ML rocket scientists. In a lot of cases, it's just statistical. And then the third and final part, I think that we often lose sight of, is what I call the monetization or the weaponization or the activation of these insights. People who can take what I've learned and turn it into an API that does a product recommendation, an API that says, you know what, we're going to auto approve this claim, or embed this new insight into a business process so I'm getting value. Because getting the data is one piece, drawing a conclusion is another, and presenting to leadership. But activating that insight into a business channel or monetizing an API is a third distinct set of skills. So across each of those, I think you've got a hire or train continuum. I think the middle one is probably one where you find a greater propensity towards the internal knowledge that you train them on how to use new tools. But I hope that's helpful. I think it's sort of data is a core competency, the insights skill set, and then finally the activation, monetization, weaponization piece is a third. All of those I think are key.
Thank you. I mean, that was the most comprehensive and insightful. And, we probably have only time for one last question, and from the audience. And I think this is a good question, right? So you keep talking about data and leveraging, insights from the data. But according to Edison, he posted a question: getting quality data across functions in organization is important, but it's a constant challenge. So, any suggestions in terms of how you can break the silos, get clean data and, successfully collaborate? Okay, so getting quality data from across the organization, getting it clean, getting collaboration to happen, and breaking through the silos. Any tips on that front?
Off for a quick one. This is going to sound very tactical and specific, but a couple of traps I've seen is the war over who owns the data, who owns customer, who owns product. That's a stupid war. Get over it. In a company, invariably, everybody owns it. So I think the sooner you can sit down and organize yourself around a committee of people who own that data, the better. I've seen lots of organizations churn endlessly around who owns it and who doesn't, and you go nowhere. I think you go one level deeper. You look at an important aspect like customer, if I use that example. Each field about a customer, male, female, age, these are trivial examples. You might say, this is owned by somebody. But I think the sooner an organization can recognize that master data is a team sport, and arguing about ownership and accountability is a waste of time, and getting down to the brass tacks of how do we recognize that everybody owns this data, and I may need individual decision rights on key attributes or fields, you'll get there faster. And I guess I would say that from watching organizations having churned for a while around getting master data or enterprise views of things, breaking through, that would be, maybe that saves you 18 months. Hopefully that's helpful.
So the answer should be shut up and work together. Thank you, John. Achim, any comments to add?
Well, I think one thing that they clearly see is that, say, with the increase of use of data, in particular now with AI, it has really driven the evolution of, say, data and technology governance as a whole discipline, and because it moved up from the technical management being included things like privacy, data protection. But we also need to understand. We need to look at into when it becomes more on an enterprise level. And that's exactly, I think, where John was going. It's not business by business unit anymore. If we manage a data risk or a tech risk at the corporate level, we also need to manage the data as an asset on a corporate level. So that's like an evolution of how we govern the use of data, and that hopefully should lead the way in overcoming these silos, because in a way it's a corporate risk using technology like AI, but it's also data as a corporate asset that has to be treated at the same level.
Awesome, thank you. Sourabh, any thoughts on this before we
I mean, from my perspective, yeah, sure. I mean, basically John and Achim kind of gave the overview, and this is probably I cannot possibly add anything more except the fact that what we can do is probably also look at the ownership being one aspect, governance being another aspect, but the other thing which I was thinking was also look at simplifying, right? Simplification of data, understanding the problem, business problem, and then rallying the data around it, because it could be a mad rush. You can look at a huge amount of data. There is a huge amount of data, but then try to understand what is the problem you're trying to solve, which I think John covered in his previous question as well. But understanding the problem is key, important, and then looking at what are the components which will comprise that data set. So I think that could be the only other thing which I can add to this.
Well, thank you so much. So if I were to sum it up, really it is to first start with the problem. Don't try to boil the ocean, or in this case, I don't know, boil the data, but to rally the data around the specific problem, and then, organizational wide, and get it done. All right, our time is up, but thank you so much, Achim. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Sourabh. It's a pleasure to have you guys here.
Thank you, Paul.
And see you next time. And let me hand the time back over to the team.
No worries. Thank you, Paul. So I think that was a very insightful panel, and I think we had a great afternoon, and I just want to summarize how the afternoon went. I mean, we started off with the conversation with the panelists on AI ops, a very important topic, lots of interactive participation from the audience, and really, how AI ops is an augment to IT operations, but it is the next evolution, not only to sort of apply technology and artificial intelligence to improve IT operations, so really bringing the augment nature, but also to bring this another sort of domain of ML model operations and AI operations, which needs to be amalgamated with IT operations. So you start to bring IT operations to the third horizon, if you may. So very interesting conversation with the panelists. And then we switched gears and we heard from Aaron Carr from TIPCO on this notion of prescriptive analyticals and augmented analyticals. I think the ability to sort of drive those elements where you have prescriptive analyticals that really says how do you create the future, how do you bring hyper-personalization, how do you change behaviors, but really the augmented analyticals is bringing the human touch, if you may, to that, and making sure that the human value add is always applicable. We then heard from Sean and Duca from Palo Alto on the whole notion of security and some very interesting statistics that he shared, especially in the adoption of cloud and what does it really mean from a shared responsibility perspective, and how it's very important to really focus on security and on the data that you actually transfer to public cloud, and how the capability exists to even define multiple perimeters as we all sort of have a virtual working zone. So very interesting insights from security. We then, for me personally, something that I truly learned, especially coming from a telecommunication industry, but a deep insight into, the clinical studies and digital medicine. We heard from Dean Ho, and this notion of small data, where you take the precision of the data, apply it to models, you arrive at an outcome, and then you sort of work back and say why, and the ability to sort of crunch years of effort into a matter of weeks, but still improve the accuracy of the outcome. So really deep insights from an industry that very few people really hear about. So I think a lot of interest from the audience as well in that study. And then I think in the last panel, we really heard from, what do we do with this talent and the talent that's really required to drive the adoption of AI, and how do you find this talent? How could you source this differently, and what is the applicability of data scientists and their social talent? So very great insights from the panelists there as well. So personally, it's been a very insightful afternoon. I've enjoyed it very thoroughly, learned a lot today. The dialogue from the audience and the participants has been great. So I just want to thank everybody. Now, before we close, I think there's one last lucky draw prize for the most interactive participant. So on that note, I'm going to pass over to Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Cindy. I mean, I really appreciate you really being focused and providing some great questions and some great moderation there. And actually, you really took notes throughout. I'm quite impressed, actually. But no, really a pleasure to have you involved again. And Cindy's been involved in digital transformation for over a decade now. And if any of you are also looking on that journey, he does provide some excellent consultation if you are looking for someone to help the team, actually. So before we go to the big final, and so thanks for joining again, Cindy, and we hope to have you involved in a future conference as well.
All right, thank you, John.
So before we dive into the final lucky draw, we just wanted to have you have a quick look at what we have coming up. So we've done our Chief Digital Officer Asia Summit, which is mainly Singapore and ASEAN. We do have our September 2 Australia Summit coming up. You can look to register for that. And then obviously the October 28 CDO Hong Kong Summit in its 4th year as well. And that's also there as a link. I'd also like you to please take a moment to fill in the survey, because we really are trying to put together content that is actionable for you, that you want to hear about. And so if you could please just take, I think it takes about 2 minutes. I think there's eight multiple choice questions about, what you thought about the content, what you'd like to see in the future, and any comments that you might have. That would be really helpful to us. I think that's the housekeeping, and then I guess it's on to the lucky draw. But before that, I also do very much want to thank all of the sponsors that helped make all of this event go on. And that was obviously the diamond sponsors, Microsoft and Denodo, our gold sponsors, Tibco and Palo Alto, who you heard from this afternoon, our roundtable sponsors at lunchtime, Informatica and Snowflake, as well as the C-suite panels, Tamar and Konica, and our consulting partner, KPMG. Great presentation from Darren this morning. So thanks to everyone for participating. Thanks to all of you for taking time out and looking through the presentations. I hope you get some value out of it. So Sucha, is that everything, or is now just the lucky draw, or is there anything else?
No, it's the lucky draw.
Okay, great. So I got out my lucky draw bowl. Usually I'd have Sucha draw for me, but not possible here. So these are only for people who ask questions. So I do appreciate, I think almost 40 people did ask questions. And this one is actually Caitlin Nguyen, from the digital transformation leader at Sanofi Pharmaceuticals. She will win the Apple Watch. We'll be contacting you about that. And thank you so much for participating. And again, just before you leave, if you could take 2 minutes to try to fill in the survey that will pop up as we shut down, and that would be great if you could fill it in. Thank you for joining us today, and we wish you all the best.